like this and tell me if I've got it right. There's a host of competing claims to the territory that now constitutes Israel. And you could have some debate about, perhaps technically, about which of those claims should reign supreme. The additional case that you make, however, is that the Israelis, the Jews, have done a tremendous amount of work in improving this territory. And I know there's a principle of ownership in Western common law, in English common law, and I'm not a lawyer, so I may muck this up to some degree, but I understand the principle. If you own territory, a vast swath of land, and you're doing nothing to it, and someone comes and squats on it and spends a lot of time improving it, at some point they actually develop a valid legal claim to the property itself. And so there seems to be something intrinsic to our notion of valid ownership, that if you're going to occupy a territory, you actually have to do something with it that's productive. And so that's at least part of the claim you're making at the moment, to buttress the notion that the Jewish people have a valid claim to the present territory.
Well, and
there were a lot of movement back and forth,
yes,
but the Jews have actually taken the land and made something of it.
Well, I'm saying something else, though. I'm saying that they held the land for 2,000 years, were kicked out. The Arabs came and conquered it and immediately lost it to others and did nothing with it. The others did nothing with it. So it was basically, they took over my apartment, okay, a long time ago. The guys who took over, who basically kicked me out, were kicked out themselves. The apartment was left barren, and many decades, in this case centuries later, I come back to this barren mess, okay, this ruin, and I build it up back, and I not only improve it, I not only make my ownership based on improvement, but that nobody else did anything with it. There was no someone else. There practically were no tenants.
Right.
There. That's my argument.
Right. You're also making the case that when the Jews came to Israel, they were doing what they could to coexist with the people who were there, with a sparse number of people who were there, but also to set up a state that would invite other people who weren't Jewish to live there as well. So it wasn't an oppressive regime in any sense.
Well, we know what happened.
Sense of the word.
We know what happened. We know that when 75 years ago, when the state of Israel was declared, you didn't have a single Arab refugee. I mean, the Arabs say now that their enmity to Israel and the reason they went to war with Israel was because of the Arab refugee. But there wasn't a single Arab refugee or Palestinian refugee when Israel was established. In fact, the refugees are the result of Arab aggression and not its cause. And in fact, the Arab onslaught, 5 Arab armies that attacked the tiny Jewish state in its inception, these 5 Arab armies created 2 refugee problems. One, the Palestinian refugees who fled before the advancing armies, being promised that they could come back in a few days because the Jews would be annihilated, driven to the sea. That didn't work out, thank God. But in those 5 Arab states, there lived many Jews. Those Jews were summarily kicked out after our war of independence. So the Arab onslaught on Israel, on Israel's inception, produced 2 refugee problems. One, Palestinian refugees, Arab refugees, we call them Palestinians. And the second is Jewish refugees. Now, Israel, with less than 1% of the total landmass of the Arab states, takes in the same number of refugees, Jewish refugees, as you had Palestinian refugees. You don't see them here. They're integrated into our society, into our government, into business, into everything. We solved, without the cornucopia of Arab oil, we solved our refugee problem caused by the Arab onslaught on Israel. The Palestinian refugee problem is kept alive by the Arabs that have 100 times more land, infinite oil resources. They keep it alive as a battering ram to produce exactly the propaganda that you say. So basically what the technique of Arab propaganda has been, and I describe it to some extent in my biography too, because you have to understand it. You have to see it to believe it, is to turn the results of Arab aggression against Israel into its cause. They first did that with the refugees when Israel was established. They then didn't accept Israel's right to exist, even though we were a tiny country. They tried to attack us again 19 years later and destroy us. That's called the 6-Day Wars. In 6 days, we pushed back the Arab countries and took over our ancestral lands of Judea, Samaria. And again, what the Arabs did is exactly the same thing. They said that our occupation, our so-called occupation of the heartland of the Jewish people, Judea and Samaria, that produced the war. No, that didn't produce the war. It was the result of their attempt, their second attempt, to annihilate us. So this technique of reversing causality, that is, accusing Israel, basically turning the results of Arab aggression into its cause, is again one of these ways of creating the delegitimization of Israel. The reason we have not had peace with the Palestinians is not because of the Arab refugees. There weren't any when they attacked us. The reason is not the territories. We didn't control these territories. They were in Arab hands before the Six-Day War. All of these things are a result of the Arab aggression. And what is the cause of the Arab aggression? It's the persistent Arab refusal to accept a Jewish state in any boundary in our ancestral homeland. And if you remove that, you get peace. Now, how do we know that we get peace? Because this persistent Arab refusal has dissipated. It's dissipated over time. As the strength of Israel, as I describe in my book, as Israel becomes not merely a fact, but a permanent fact in the Middle East, so they know they can't get rid of it. So Arab countries begin to make peace with us. And I had the privilege, which I describe again in my book, of forging four peace agreements with Arab states, because that barrier, that obstacle of refusing to accept a Jewish state at any boundary has disappeared. Where does it persist? In the Palestinians, who are 1% to 2% of the entire Arab world, wagging it's the tail wagging the dog. Or they tried until recently. They were quite successful in wagging the dog. Palestinians, cling on to the fantasy of eliminating Israel, denying us our historical and present rights to live anywhere in this land, refusing to any kind of practical compromise, refusing to accept the declaration of Israel in the UN, the partition resolution. We did, they refused, refusing any kind of realistic negotiation for peace. What has happened, and here's what happened, Jordan. For the last quarter of a century, after the initial peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan, for 25 years we had no peace treaties with any Arab country, because the elites, the foreign policy elites and the experts and the intellectuals explained, you cannot make peace with the rest of the Arab world unless you make peace first with the Palestinians. There's a problem there.
Right.
Well, you can't, because the Palestinians are not interested in peace with Israel. They're interested in the peace without Israel. They're not interested in a state next to Israel. They're interested in a state instead of Israel. So if you wait for the Palestinians, you'll wait another quarter of a century, another half century, another century. You're not going to get anywhere. I had to break that logjam, and I describe how I did that in my book. I had to go around the Palestinians, go to the United Arab Emirates, go Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, and make peace with them. Why did they change their attitude towards Israel? They changed it because of the result, the growth of Israeli power. As Israel became more powerful technologically, we made a free market revolution that released the genius in our people. Israel became the innovation nation. You can't do that if you're paying 75% marginal tax rate, right? So we cut tax rates, put in basically a capitalist economy, and Israel exploded. But it also became very powerful militarily, because we could now afford to fund it. The combination of economic power through free markets and military and intelligence power that combined to give us diplomatic power. And with that, Arab leaders in the area began to see Israel not as their enemy, but as their indispensable ally against a force that was threatening both Israel and them, and that's Iran's aggression. And secondly, they saw the innovation nation that is Israel as a fount of tremendous technology that could better the lives of their people. And therefore we made these historic peace agreements in record time, because now we were no longer bound by the Palestinian straitjacket that you're familiar with in Toronto and in New Zealand and so on. The Arab world is not there. Some of it is, but a lot of it is changing. And my idea is, how do you solve the Palestinian problem? Anytime they want to truly sit down and negotiate, be my guest. I'll be happy to do that. And I've tried that in the past. But in reality, I took a different track. Instead of saying, first we'll solve the problem with the Palestinians, then we'll solve the problem with the Arab world, I actually reversed it. I said, let's go to the Arab world and let's get peace with the Arab world, and then circle back to the Palestinians. If they're ready to come before, fine. But if not, let's get peace with 99% and then try to make peace with the 1%, as opposed to let's try the implacable 1% and wait until we get to the other 99%. That's a complete reversal of concept. It's still being challenged. You'll see some of the old guard still saying, no, we have to, we have to go to the Palestinians before we go to the Arab world, and we'll never get peace.
Do you have a coffee lover on your holiday shopping list? Black Rifle has all the best brewing